Hello and welcome to Sustainably 14. My name is Sienna and I will be your host throughout this conversation. Sustainably 14 is a project I recently started to inform people on how we can live more sustainably for our oceans. The Sustainably 14 project directly falls in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 14, which is to conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. For more information on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, feel free to visit Moving World's blog or the Sustainable Development Goals official page at www.globalgoals.org. Both of these websites have more information on all 17 goals of the UN. Today I have invited a special guest, Mckenna Reinsch. Mckenna has her Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science with a Marine and Coastal concentration from Texas A&M University, Corpus Christi. Now Mckenna works as a laboratory technician at the Hart Research Institute in the Coastal Conservation and Restoration Laboratory. Today I invited Mckenna to Sustainably 14 to discuss the state of our oceans and what can be done in terms of coastal and marine conservation.
My name is Mckenna Reinsch. I graduated from Texas A&M University Corpus Christi with my bachelor's in environmental science and a concentration in marine and coastal resources. I currently work as a laboratory technician at the Hart Research Institute for the Coastal Conservation and Restoration Ecology Lab, and we primarily look at oyster reef restoration on both small and large scales within the Gulf, as well as different types of environments like serpulid reefs in Baffin Bay and a plethora of other coastal environments. But yeah, I'm excited to be here.
My first question, why is ocean conservation important?
Ocean conservation is, I may be a little biased, but one of the most important aspects of conservation, I think. The ocean serves a purpose in so many ways that we don't give it enough credit for, from an economic benefit to recreational to supplying us with so much life. And I think it's only right to conserve it as a resource and as an environment and give back to what's been given to us, especially when we've been degrading it for so long.
In terms of marine and coastal conservation, what is the current state of the health of our oceans?
I would say our oceans are not the healthiest. I mean, years of overharvesting and polluting and treating it as not, I don't want to say a dump, but a dump, you know? I mean, tragedy of the commons, something that I think we've all learned in high school or college at some point, is very real. And I think there's so many efforts that can be done and need to be done in order to conserve it as a resource, and it's not much of an option either. I mean, we need our oceans, we need our waterways to function in the way that they're meant to. Without it, there's nothing there, you know? And I think specifically with my research, I look at overharvesting of oyster shells specifically and what sort of efforts can be done to restore those reefs. You know, in 2008, more than 2.6 million pounds of oysters were harvested from Texas bays alone, which is the second largest commercial oyster harvest in the US. So you look at that statistic alone and think about all of the other harvesting practices that are out there, whether that's dredging or fishing or polluting, you know, and even taking water from our Gulf.
What are some of the most prominent issues you see in your work when it comes to conservation of our oceans?
I think on a large scale, kind of like what I talked about before, was pollution and overharvesting and seeing the ocean as something that'll just naturally bounce back. But without efforts on our end, there's no end in sight. I think on a smaller scale, some of the biggest problems that I see is just a general lack of information, a lack of understanding of how the ocean works and how much of an impact humans really have. I think educating the public and allowing them to be a part of something bigger than themselves and making science accessible to all is really how we can move forward and address some of those issues.
What types of action can regular people take to support ocean conservation?
People can take all sorts of action, whether that's on a smaller scale or a larger scale. I think it can be as small as opting out of a plastic bag or a plastic straw and maybe investing in a reusable water bottle, or just being more mindful of the trash that you produce. Even if you're more inland, I mean, this is a problem for not just coastal cities regarding marine and coastal conservation, because you look at Texas and everything is, I mean, you look at anywhere and it's all attached. It's all going to end up in the Gulf somehow in our oceans. And I think being more aware of sustainable practices on your end as an individual is huge. And then on a larger scale, just getting involved, from cleanups, beach cleanups, to just picking up trash on the side of the street. And I think there's so many resources out there that people don't realize are accessible. So just doing your research and finding ways to get involved in your local community, or even reading an article or listening to a podcast while you're doing laundry or anything to get involved and to just be more aware of things that you can do and what's really happening, I think is huge.
What should people expect to happen at a higher level from corporations or governments or anywhere else that's a powerhouse?
I definitely think this is a difficult question. You don't want to get political. I think the best way to go about it is to use research in a way that is applied. So applying your findings and your data to different policy makers and stakeholders and agencies that can actually make a difference, whether that's more regulation or having faith that these agencies are going to be making informed decisions moving forward. And I think with reliable data and both quantitative and qualitative research, applying that to these agencies like the EPA or TCEQ, I think holds a lot of weight. So applying the science in a way that informs policyholders to make better decisions is what we can expect of our agencies.
Thank you so much for joining me again. And is there anything you'd like to shout out or recommend people check out?
Absolutely. If you all are interested in some of the work that the Heart Research Institute does, definitely look us up, Heart Research Institute, Texas A&M University, Corpus Christi. You can join our mailing list, not only for my research specifically, but we have a plethora of other labs that are involved and collaborators in both Mexico and Cuba as well. If you all are in the Coastal Bend area, we do have 2 ways to get involved in some community restoration events. That's going to be May 3rd and May 10th this year. They're both Saturdays at Goose Island State Park to help rebuild an oyster reef in the Aransas Bay. We're going to be putting recycled oyster shell into biodegradable bags and placing them into the water to restore those reefs, hence sink your shucks. So hope to see you guys there.
Thank you for joining us on Sustainably 14. My name's Sienna, and I've been your host for this conversation. Make sure to visit the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals page and to check out Mckenna Reinsch's work over at the Heart Research Institute. We have a lot of work to do when it comes to ocean conservation, so I hope we have inspired you today to make a difference. For more information, you can also visit the Sustainably 14 webpage, which will be linked underneath the podcast. Thank you for joining us here on Sustainably 14. Until next time.